else. All right, open your Bibles. We're going to be in Daniel 2, and I did make a decision. We're going to look at the first half of Daniel chapter 2, and then in our third and final session, since we are talking about, spiritual warfare, I have a battle cry for you that I'm going to share with you in our third session. Is that okay? You can't stop me. I'm going to do it. So... And I'm really excited to share that with you. But let's look at Daniel 2. All right, so here we have Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They are in this 3-year accelerated program. They are studying things, and this is the kind of question, this is not just a stupid nerd question, but to actually stop and ask it, what were they reading? Because that helps you understand what's going on in this culture. I told you that Babylon is a technological marvel. They had never seen anything like this before. One of the wonders of the ancient world is there at Babylon, the Hanging Gardens, which unfortunately no contemporary representations have survived in time, so we're not exactly sure what they look like. But a king had created these lush hanging gardens in this harsh desert environment because his bride was from some other place that had water and like trees and whatnot, and she really missed it. So, if the mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So he built these things for her. It's amazing. So these guys are there and they're studying. And they've had to deal with things like, who or what is behind human history? At least it is implicit. I think you'll agree with me that it's there. And because of their knowledge and understanding of reality, they are able to put their faith in a God that has written their story, and they know our story is here. And Daniel said so in the book. We're here because of our disobedience to God nationally. Because Israel had and has a covenant relationship with God, right? And God in the covenant said, if you bless me, I will bless you. If you turn your back on me, you're going to be in trouble. And then you have the prophets, or as my professor in seminary said, the covenant enforcers who would come in and say, you guys, y'all, we need to get back to the covenant over and over and over. And God finally said, enough, right? The northern kingdom didn't last all that long. Southern kingdom did a little bit better, but still. So these boys knew that. They also, if you were to spend time in chapter 1, they dealt with the issue of identity. Because as you know, if you have any familiarity, and forgive me if you don't, but if you have some familiarity with the book of Daniel, you know there's this whole issue of they had their names changed, right? So we know Daniel by his Hebrew name. Rarely do we think of him as Belteshazzar. His Babylonian name, and then, of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or if you're a fan of VeggieTales, Rack, Shack, and Benny, you know them by those names, and we tend to forget their names, their Hebrew names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And everything about them, the Babylonian Empire tried to change. Now, if I'm right, that it is kind of like the modern university. Just think about this. Every university on the planet is attempting to change your sons, your daughters, your grandchildren, your nieces, nephews, brothers and sisters. The question is, into what or whom and by what means? Every college or university on the planet is attempting to mold your students. Same thing was true in 605 BC. Their names were changed. They were given new identities that were more in line with the pantheon, the multiple gods of Babylon. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. And they wanted to erase their identity and start all over again with them. And these boys said no, because they knew their identity did not come from the authority of Nebuchadnezzar or Marduk, or Ishtar, or Nebu, or any of the gods of Babylon, but from Yahweh. They knew that. So then we get to chapter 2, and this is where those who like the eschatology bit of Daniel really like to start. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're not even getting to the dream. This is all the prelude leading up to it. And the question that we're asking, this fundamental question, so we've dealt with who or what is human history. I gave you a little piece of identity that we talked about. And this one is, do I have access to the supernatural? So in chapter 2, verse 1, here's what it says. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. So his mind was troubled and he could not sleep. Now, is this the first Old Testament despot that's been kept awake by dreams at night? Nope. Who's the other one, famously? Sorry? Pharaoh, right? Of Egypt. Now, I don't know about you guys, how you think. I have a pretty wild 8th grade sanctified imagination. So I have a list of things, events in biblical history that I'm going to ask God to play back for me when I get to heaven. That he's recorded on, TiVo or his giant DVR or whatever it is. But there's some things I want to see. I want to see Pharaoh's dreams. I want to see skinny cows eating fat cows. Am I right? I know, right? That's one of the things I want to see. I want to see skinny cows like chowing down. It'd probably be gross, and I only want to see it once. But all right, so we know that there are other despots that have dreams. We also know that God communicates through dreams, does he not? And you probably should also be aware, if you don't consider yourself a Daniel scholar, and I'm not either, but this is not Nebuchadnezzar's only dream. Do you know later on, after the fiery furnace, do you know in chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar himself is one of the co-authors of the book of Daniel? And he begins by saying, let me tell you what the Lord God Almighty did for me. Not to me, for me. And talks about his 7 years as a beast, and I wish we had time. We just don't. Same guy. So he could not sleep. So verse 2, so the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers. Henceforth, we shall call them the wizards. All right, so this is kind of like Hogwarts. This is a little Harry Potter going on. And by the way, people that say, well, I would never read such things because I don't want to read about wizards and witchcraft. There it is. Pharaoh's magicians, when they copied some of the plagues, do you think that was by sleight of hand? No, they really did it. How? Demonic power. That's how. That's scary, right? But it's here. Okay? So he calls in his wizards to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. I'm nearly certain that's the tone and inflection that he used. Then the wizards answered the king, may the king live forever. Pro tip, when you're called into the study of the person who holds your life in the palm of their hands, compliment them first. It's a good place to start. So these guys come in and they say, may the king live forever. And then look at what they say. Tell your servants the dream and we will interpret it. This is a smart move. Think about what's going on here. Nebuchadnezzar has had a dream. It's keeping him up at night, so he calls in the astrologers, the wizards, his dream team, and he says, guys, I need you to tell me what my dream means. So, logically, what's the first thing they say after the compliment? What did you dream? Seems like a good place to start. Like if I told you I had the craziest dream last night, fueled by the squirty cheese I bought at Meyer brand squirty cheese, not that good. I'm just saying, comes in a can. I did eat all of it. But probably didn't help with my dreaming. I had this crazy squirty cheese-fueled dream. It was so bizarre. And you wouldn't be like, oh, okay. You'd say, well, what was it? Right? Okay. Verse 5, the king replied to the astrologers, this is what I firmly decided. If you do not tell me my dream, what my dream was, and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. This, by the way, is Nebuchadnezzar's favorite altar call. He uses the same one at the end of chapter 3 with the fiery furnace episode, with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah taking a stand, high-profile public witness for God in a hostile environment. Love the end of chapter 3. We're not bowing down to you because our God is able to save us, but even if he does not, if our lives end today, we are not bowing to you. They had no guarantee that they were going to survive that ordeal. They were willing to die again for Yahweh. Right? And at the end of the story, there's that fourth figure. We don't know who that was. It is not specific. We could debate it, but it's not specific in Daniel 3. And what does Nebuchadnezzar say? Whoa, your God is awesome. And the boys were like, well, we've been telling you that. Where have you been? So he sends out this decree. If anyone speaks ill of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I will chop you into bits and have your houses turned into piles of rubble. I don't recommend that for an altar call. But, when you're a megalomaniac, these are the things that you say. So he says to them, guys, I've made up my mind. Not only are you going to give me a decent interpretation of this dream, but you're going to tell me what I dreamt. That way I know you're for real. Now, why would he do this? Well, I think we can deduce some reasons. Now, I'm not building in a theology on what I'm about to say, but I have to stop and think, why would this happen? Well, would it make sense to you? Do you think it's plausible? This is not the first time he's had a dream that he thinks is of some significance, right? So he's probably called in these guys before. Guys, I had a dream. I dreamt that I was riding a narwhal and it had a patch over one eye. And I was riding this narwhal, and we came across this giant unicorn. It was all sparkly. And the narwhal and the unicorn did battle, and my narwhal won. That's what I dreamt. What do you think that means? And can't you just see the wizards going, well, that probably means you're just the greatest king that has ever lived. And we think there's a prophecy in this dream as well. Ooh. Nebuchadnezzar might say, what was the prophecy? Well, the prophecy is that after work, you're going to take us all out for Frosties. Nebuchadnezzar's like, this sounds reasonable to me. All right, get in the van, right? We're going to go get Frosties. So I think probably these guys are telling him what he wants to hear. Does this make sense? Now, I could be wrong, okay? I don't think I am, but this makes sense. I mean, what would you do if interpreting a dream? I mean, you see this all throughout ancient history. So this idea of a separation of religion and civic life, is really kind of a unique American idea. In the ancient world, unheard of. Like Greek armies are going out to battle other Greek armies or to kick Persian butt or whatever they're going to do on a day, and they bring the priests out, and the priest has got like the chicken, and they're like, all right, we want you to slay the chicken and spread the guts and read the omens. And so there's the chicken guts. And what do you think the priest says? I don't think it's going to go well for us today. You think that ever happened? Not generally, if he wants to, keep his job and his head where it belongs. Because, like the Spartans are like, oh, well, the priest said, we'll kill him too. Right? So they're always telling you what you want to hear. So I think Nebuchadnezzar, he's not stupid. Is he? No, of course not. So he's telling them, guys, not going to happen. So if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive gifts and rewards, great honor. Tell me the dream and interpret it. Once more, verse 7, they replied, let the king tell his servants the dream and we will interpret it for him. Come on, man. Verse 8, then the king answered, I am certain you're trying to gain time because you realize this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream and I will know that you can interpret it for me. Okay, it's on now, right? There's no going back. He's not going to go like, I'm kidding. I was just being salty. No. He is the most powerful man on the planet. There's no Bill of Rights. There's no single phone call. That's it. If he wants them dead, it's the word of the king and their lives are forfeit. Now, if you highlight, mark, or underline in your Bibles, I would encourage you to do so with the next few verses beginning in 10. The astrologers, the wizard, answered the king. Listen to what they say. There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. The astrologers say, gentlemen, there is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. Are they right or are they wrong? They are so right. What person on the planet can read the mind of the king? No one. If you would like to do a little philosophy and you're like, oh, please don't, I'm sorry, I will. If you want to do a little philosophy, we could do philosophy of mind. It's a fascinating and sometimes confusing branch of the discipline. But do you understand that one of the ideas of philosophy of mind, you can never, ever have someone else's first-person perspective. Let me give you the Andy Giesman 8th grade definition of what that means. You've all heard it said, in order to understand another man, you should walk a mile in his shoes. It's to understand perspective. We're all sitting in the same room right now, right? Visually, your perspective is generally different than mine. Yes? You're looking kind of this way with the light. I'm looking this way. My retinas are seared. I'm going to go blind after today. But we're seeing different perspectives. So if I came and I sat in the front pew, I'm now sharing your general perspective, am I not? But am I seeing what you're seeing? No. Could I ever? No. Despite how hard I try, can I actually have your first-person perspective? No. Why? I have no access to your mind. None. Not one piece. So when these guys say, and I understand, spoiler alert, I know why you would say, no, they're wrong. They're actually right. And that makes a story brilliant. Okay? That gives it the shock and awe, which we should really apply to biblical stories and not ever get bored by them. So when they say in verse 10, there's no one on earth who can do what the king asks, they're right. Then he goes on to say, they go on to say, no king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. Men, there is so much packed into these two verses about the idea of reality, worldview, belief. It is stuffed in there. So this idea that no one can read the mind of the king, can tell what the dream is. That's impossible. No one has ever asked that before. You can't do that. They said, I'll tell you who could do it. The gods that we serve, that we worship here in Babylon, but they aren't here. Transcendent, not imminent. Out there, never here, even though we've built houses and temples for them, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but they aren't local. This is brilliant. Now, what I'd like to do, well, let's keep going. One more verse, two more verses. This made the king so angry and furious. Again, he's got like a short fuse. I love the Daniel 3 description of Nebuchadnezzar's anger. It says, and his anger was so great that his face changed. Like literally means it changed shape. Like, slapped down to Mr. Potato Head eyes. He's so mad, all right? So he's got a short fuse. So this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. Whom does that include? Daniel. And we'll say it together. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. All of them. Well, that seems extra. Yep. Well, he's a despot. Can he go back to Jerusalem or wherever he wants to go to find more? Sure. It's a commodity. Big deal. He orders their execution. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Now, a reasonable question is, well, where are Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah? How come they didn't get called in? Well, I have two theories. One, it wasn't their day to work in the office for their work-study program. Or two, I know from my experience, Tony, you'll appreciate this, they were where all college students are when they don't have class, and that's playing ping pong. I spent hours with Dan playing, right? Do you play too? Oh, yeah, well, we got to play. Okay, so they're playing ping pong. I would have majored in ping pong in college if that was a thing. But I don't know where they were, but they're all, if you think that those four boys are the only four in the accelerated 3-year program, you're wrong, right? There's lots of them, and so they're cycled through. I don't know exactly how many they are, but we know that they're now upperclassmen. And the decree has gone out to slay them. Their lives are on the line again. I want to talk to you about Babylon. I want to talk to you about the background of what's going on, because when this was written, when Daniel wrote this, recipients of this narrative had a basic understanding of ancient worldview cultures. right? It's just assumed. That's why things aren't explained in detail. It's assumed that you have an idea what's going on. Does that make sense to you? So it would be wise if we know what they know. So I started doing some research. I wanted to try to figure out what were these guys studying. So I made it up, the Hammurabi School of Wizardry, and whatever I called it. I can't remember what I made it up. But I tried to figure out what was life like in Babylon, because these guys would have seen things that they had never seen before. Let's begin with their arrival. How many of you have ever taken an official college tour? Right? Now, I worked at what is now Clark Summit University for many years in the recruitment office. I gave tours. Please don't repeat it outside of this room, but we sometimes made stuff up. Because there's like this kind of like bell tower thing that for years nobody's really allowed up there. And they're like, what happens up there? We'd make up all kinds of stuff. We're like, that's actually really the grassy knoll from the JFK assassination that happened up there. People are like, we did? We're like, mm-hmm. Or we would talk about nuns or monks or whatever who lived there, and we made up all kinds of stuff. Shane, don't ever repeat any of this. But when we weren't being stupid, when we gave a tour, and for those of you who've been on tours, do the tour guides show you things on purpose? Okay, so like if you were to go to a state university, right? So I met somebody here from Mount Pleasant, Central Michigan University. You go to Central Michigan and you visit there. Do you think they're going to randomly choose a student's dormitory room for you to look in? No. Oh, sorry, that one's awash in a sea of vomit, beer, and red Solo cups. Let's see if we can find something, right? So they're showing you things that are nice on purpose. If Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unless they're different than any other captive or tribute brought into the city, they are brought in through what was called the Ishtar Gate. It has not survived. We only have historian and artist ideas of what it looked like, but we are told from its description it was beautiful. Brick that is covered in porcelain, gold, and blue. It is glazed. There are dragons and griffins, and Nebuchadnezzar's name is inscribed on every brick. And they would have walked in because they wanted the shock and awe. They wanted the tributes coming into the city to know, we own you. And as they came in, I do not know this for a fact, but based on what I've studied on Mesopotamian culture, their eye was probably drawn up to the top of a giant ziggurat, that's with a Z, not a C, a ziggurat, like a stepped pyramid, all the way at the top, and they would have seen this little house-looking thing at the top with a dark door. And can't you imagine Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and everybody else as they're walking in, and they've never seen anything like this before, and they see in the center the greatest ziggurat, and they're all over the city, but the biggest one is to their chief god Marduk. He's kind of like what Zeus is to the Greeks. Marduk is to the Babylonians. And so their eyes raised up, and they're wondering, what is up there? It's scary. In fact, Belteshazzar. Daniel's name goes from God is my judge to may Marduk protect him. And then they have to go through this whole dietary thing, and their names are changed. They're given their IDs, and then they begin studying. Well, what are they reading? There are 4 books that I'm pretty sure that they read. 2 of them, if I were a betting man, I'd go all in on. The other 2, not quite so sure. All of them, you could actually download a free version of today. Don't, because you get what you pay for, okay? Free stuff that you read is usually free for a reason, because the interpretation is terrible. All right, so 2 books, 2 of them Mesopotamian, 2 of them Greek. Are you following? So there are 2 books that I'm certain that they read that were Mesopotamian. One you've probably heard of, many of you have heard of it, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Anybody have to read that in college or high school? Okay. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the story of a demigod, that means half human, half God, who's trying to figure out how do I avoid death to make a name for myself, by making a name for myself in this life. Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh to the Mesopotamians is kind of like our New Testament. It is the hero story. Our hero story is, of course, Jesus of Nazareth, yes? So their hero story is much different than our hero story, and it revolves around this guy, Gilgamesh. Now, where does this book come from? The first known copies of Gilgamesh were known to be circulating in the ancient Near East at 2000 BC. Do you know who was born in 2000 BC? Abraham. So I'm telling you about a book that's 4,000 years old. So it's ancient by the time these boys get to Babylon. Are you following that? And so it tells a story of Gilgamesh, who's a jerk. He's a complete jerk. And the gods are like, well, we got to make a buddy for him. Maybe that'll help. So they make this guy called Enkidu. It's an unfortunate name. So they make this guy called Enkidu. And so Enkidu and Gilgamesh go off on all these adventures. They chop down sacred trees of Lebanon. They kill a cyclops. Enkidu gets killed, and Gilgamesh is all sad. He gets hit on by the goddess Ishtar, and he's all like, nah, honey, I'm good. So he's going to come home, and he wants to build a city and build a name for himself because all the way the theme through the book is I have to avoid death. Because for Mesopotamians, whether they be Assyrians or they be the Babylonians or any other ancient Mesopotamian people group, they have no hope in death because for them there are two kinds of gods, the gods above the earth and the gods under the earth. And at death there is no reward. It's only a matter of how bad will it be. So you make a name for yourself in this life so that in the next life it won't be quite as bad. It's still bad. You're going to be forced to eat clay and dirt for eternity. Not kidding. By the way, in Gilgamesh does find out that there is one person who has achieved immortality. And he's like, I got to talk to this dude. I need to get his secret. So he makes a great journey and finds this person whose name is unpronounceable in the book. He finds this guy, and he goes to talk to him to get his secret of immortality. And the person he talks to is the lone survivor of a global flood. Oh, the Bible copied it from Gilgamesh. Or it's the other way around. See, I never quite got that when people are like, you see, the Bible copied stuff. Or ancient civilizations also knew about this flood. I don't understand what the big deal is. I mean, honestly. So he finds the guys, so this Noahic figure, and Noah's like sitting in a rocking chair. He's like, what do you want? He gets up there, he's like, dude, you survived the flood. You need to tell me your secret. You know what the Noahic figure tells him? There isn't one. I got lucky. Stinks to be you. What? I came all this way. Sorry, pal. And I'll explain why the Noahic guy told him that in the first place. So he goes back and he builds a great city, making a great name for himself. And do you know what city Gilgamesh built? Ur of the Chaldees. Who's from Ur? Abraham. Isn't that interesting? I find that interesting. So this is the hero story that little boys like Nebuchadnezzar are reared on. This is the ideal. I will make a name in this life. This kind of explains why the megalomaniac builds the 90-foot tall statue covered in gold to himself. Right? Doesn't that kind of make sense? I will make a name for myself. Well, this Noah guy, like, why did he tell Gilgamesh that really he got lucky? Well, this brings us to the second book that would have been studied in Mesopotamia. This one is probably not as familiar to you. It's called the Enuma Elish. It's really easy to spell. E-N-U-M-A, Elish, E-L-I-S-H. The Enuma Elish. If Gilgamesh is kind of like their New Testament, the Enuma Elish is their Old Testament. It is their cosmology. It is their creation story. And it tells you how the gods became gods and defeated their rivals. Like all ancient cosmologies, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Persian, they all do the same thing. It tells you how the gods became gods, how they made stuff. And by the way, none of them have the gods making stuff out of nothing. None of them. All of them have the gods having a pre-existing creation kit, like they open it up and they got stuff to work with, or through procreation with their siblings. I mean, ew, on top of other things, but it's just gross, right? This is how it is. So, and in all these stories it talks about, well, where does humanity come from? Well, guess what? The Enuma Elish talks about that. These are the things that Daniel's studying. So in the Enuma Elish, here's their story. The gods are sitting around the Babylonian version of Mount Olympus one day, eating grapes and hanging out and, basically hitting on each other and fruiting around like gods do. And one of them has an idea, says, you know what? I had a brilliant thought just a minute ago. It's probably Nebu. And Nebu says, if we made ourselves a sentient being, they could make us sandwiches. Geisman translation. They could make us sandwiches. And we wouldn't have to make our own sandwiches anymore. And the other gods, including Marduk and Ishtar, are like, that's a great idea. We need someone to do stuff for us. Just stop and think about the theological implications of that. I'm gonna put a hold there, and I want to take you ahead in time to Greece in the days of Socrates. He gets charged with a capital crime. He goes to answer the summons that it's eventually going to lead to his execution in 399 BC. And in one of the dialogues that deals with this whole issue, he runs into a guy named Euthyphro at the court. And Euthyphro is like, look at me, I'm wearing my big boy toga. I'm here to bring charges of murder against my own father. And Socrates is like, oh, look at you. You clearly know what you're talking about. Please tell me what justice is. And by the way, Euthyphro can never answer the question. But one of the things that he says, after painting himself into a corner with a thing famously called the Euthyphro dilemma, which Socrates is like, and he kind of takes him down to that. You're not answering the question. So the last thing Euthyphro tries, and this speaks to what I'm talking about, he said, justice is ministering to the gods. And Socrates says, wait, like the gods need us to do stuff for them? And Euthyphro's like, well, yeah. So you know what Socrates, the Greek philosopher, 400 years before the time of Christ said to Euthyphro? If they need us, they are not gods. I will never forget the day in a theology class. We had a couple professors back in the day that students loved to learn from and also feared. One of them, his nickname was Iron Joe. And I'll never forget the day Iron Joe leaned across the lectern. He said, now, I know a lot of you grew up in the churches that have an association with our school. You've been to camps, you've been to Christian schools, you've been to retreats, and you've been told over and over again the reason you need to go to Bible college is because God needs you. He doesn't need any of you. I thought, yes, he does. My youth pastor said so. He doesn't need you, Geisman. And it dawned on me, the God of the universe who spoke it into existence doesn't need me. Because if he does, he is not God. So, back to Mesopotamian Mount Olympus. And they're like, yes, brilliant idea. Let's do it. But one of the gods speaks up and says, hey, hold up. I like me my sandwiches too, but y'all know if we make this inferior thing, we're going to get sick of it. You're like, dude, good point. So, in the Enuma Elish, they make man by, you'll never guess what they use. You want to take a guess? Dirt. They form him out of the dust of the ground, out of clay. But the gods don't say, and let us make him in our image. They're like, heck no. We're not going to do that. They're like, well, we can make this thing, but we got to infuse it with something to like make it alive. And they're like, hey, look at Gary the God over there that nobody likes. Gary the God, nobody likes, and he like says things, and he's kind of treacherous and traitorous. Let's kill him. They're like, yeah. So they slay Gary the god, and they infuse this clay thing with the blood of a treacherous, treasonous god to give it life. So what does that mean about the creation of humanity from the Mesopotamian point of view? Is humanity created essentially good or essentially flawed? Flawed, because they want it to die off. And when it doesn't, and it like keeps going, and the gods are like, okay, great, we have sandwiches, but look at these knuckleheads, we're all sick of them. We need to thin the herd. Well, let's try disease. Let's try pestilence. Let's try a flood. And one of the gods says, well, if we wipe them all out, no more sandwiches. I'm serious, it's in the Enuma Elish. So he runs down, he's like, yo, Noah, I know you worked at Subway putting yourself through college. You make a banging sandwich. There's a flood coming. Please build a boat. Okay. Whose benefit was that for? The sentient being that the gods get sick of? Or the gods? The gods. And just like other ancient books, they don't get along. They change their minds, and they never tell us what they want. Okay, so quickly, the two other books that I think they would have had read, they would have been on the new bestseller list, but they would have been around for a couple hundred years at least. And one of them, I'm sure you've heard of, the Iliad. The Iliad is the Greek version of Gilgamesh. Achilles is the crybaby, mama's boy, wannabe demigod who is trying to avoid death because he cannot have immortality. Because his goddess mother dipped his siblings in the river Styx to give them immortality, drowned them all, and then with him, is like, well, I'm not going to dip him all the way, so I'm going to leave his heel exposed so that I don't want to kill him. Well, that ensured he wasn't going to attain immortality. And part of the story of the whole book is he's like, I can't go be in Olympus. And she's like, please, Zeus, do something. Zeus is like, it's your problem. So he better make a name for himself. So he's just as angry as Gilgamesh. In fact, the very first word in Iliad is the word rage. It's all about the rage of its hero. Rage, sing muse the rage of Peleus' son, Achilles. And so he makes a name for himself by cutting down Trojans by the hundreds, all to get to the one man that killed his buddy, Patroclus, which is kind of like Enkidu. And he kills the great Trojan hero, Hector. But he's trying to avoid death as well. And then the Greeks have their own cosmology. It's called theogony by a guy named Hesiod. You've probably had some familiarity with that. If you've seen any of DC Comics or the Marvel Universe, it's just a retelling of the Greek gods. And the Greek gods, their greatest rival were the Titans. Avengers fans, what planet is Thanos from? Titan. Oh, they didn't even try for that one. But then it gets a little confusing because they slip in the whole Thor thing, which sideline Disney's Thor. Okay, so the fourth one, abysmal. Okay, the first one was really interesting, and I went into it because I never read these comics. I know more about the myths than I do about the comics. But I'm thinking, who wants to watch a Thor story? He's a jerk. Odin's a jerk. Everybody knows Loki's a jerk. Jerk, 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 jerk. Who wants to watch this? And you know what Disney did without even realizing it? They smuggled in the gospel. Oops. Because you have this powerful God who's sent to earth and he learns humility. And when he learns humility, what happens? Humanity is saved. Huh. I guarantee you, because I've read Norse myth, the gods don't care. I'm telling you, they're jerks. All of them. So you can see, it's pretty obvious, I think Tony Stark is like Zeus, or if you prefer DC, Aquaman is clearly Poseidon, Wonder Woman is Athena. I'm open to debate. I'm pretty sure Batman is Hades, but whatever. We can talk about that, and if you know, you know. But it's their story. And it's the same thing as the Babylonian story. There's no hope. They make man basically because they need something from him, not for their pleasure, and they make everything inherently flawed. Now let's come back to Babylon. All right. So in my sanctified 8th grade imagination, I imagine Daniel in between classes heading over to the University of Babylon cafeteria. Probably pretty banging. You know what I'm saying? He's got to go past the carved pork. No, I can't have that. No, I can't have the bacon cheeseburger. So he's hitting up the salad bar. You got to be careful. Can't put turkey and ranch on the same thing, right? So he's got to be careful. But he's got a big salad, and he sits down. And can't you just imagine another tribute sitting across from him and saying to him, Belteshazzar, I've heard those guys you hang out with call your name Daniel. What does that mean? This name is strange to me. I don't know Hebrew names. What does that mean? Can't you just see Daniel putting his stuff down and kind of folding his arms and leaning across this guy and with a wry smile on his face saying, oh, it means God is my judge. The look of horror that would have come across anybody's face, because knowing that you have a name that implies at your end you will stand under the judgment of the gods, whether you know who Yahweh is or not, this would bring you abject fear, because there is no hope. In this tribute, we'll just call him Andreas. That's my name in Greek. Let's say he's from Macedonia. I'd say to him, aren't you live in complete terror day by day? And can't you see Daniel leaning across him? And perhaps he quoted scripture that would have been available to him because it is probably the oldest thing in the Bible, from Job. And looking at this guy, he said, no, for I know that my Redeemer lives. And in the end, I will stand with my eyes. I will see him. And did Daniel know that? No, I don't know that he knew that passage, but he knew that concept because Daniel believed in a resurrection. He believed in the hope of the covenant-keeping Yahweh, who keeps his word, who's keeping his word now. That's why he's in Babylon. Who's always kept his word. No, I don't fear death. In fact, bring it, Andreas. What can you do to me? I have nothing to fear. I serve the God of the universe, who has written this story, who knows how it will end. As he folds up his copy, be on stone of course, but folds up his copy of Gilgamesh and Theogony and Iliad and the Enuma Elish, and he looks at Andreas and says, there's a better story. Your gods claim to have made us poorly. I have read that my God made everything good. And when he made the pinnacle of his creation, us, he said it is very good. There's no inherent flaw. Now, is Daniel a sinner? Yes. Is he part of the fall? Yes. Is that part of the plan? No. Verse 14. When Arioch, all right, this is the guy in charge of campus security, when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. Wait, he didn't talk to him like a whiny millennial? Nope. Wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went to the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. What a stud! Daniel, who's probably all of 17 years old, goes to the most powerful man on the planet, steps in and says, give me time to interpret your dream. Would you do that? So then, verse 17, then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. All right, so he goes back to the dorm and he talks to his roommates. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery so that he and his friends may not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. What is their first line of defense? To get on their faces and beg God for help. Oh, in the name of Jesus, if a generation would do that. Instead of coming up with plans, strategies, and pragmatic ideas of what works, get on your face and beg God for help. And if you don't know, ask him for wisdom. They don't come up with a strategy today like, Hananiah, oh no, I think we ought to transfer. It's too hard to go to school here. It's a hostile environment, you think? Or maybe Daniel's like, no, I have an idea. I'm going to create a temporary overlay for our Facebook profile photos. It's going to be a Star of David, so we can raise awareness of despotism in the Babylonian Empire. Ooh, yeah, and let's have a really scathing hashtag. Hashtag never Nebuchadnezzar. Hashtag not my despot. Because we're going to raise awareness. You know what awareness alone does? Nothing. Nothing. No, instead of that, and of course I'm being facetious, so instead of that, they get on their faces. This is the first recorded college prayer meeting. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, and somebody needs to put these next few verses to music. This is beautiful. Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. Who or what is behind human history? Yahweh. Verse 22, he reveals the deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. So as they come in through the Ishtar gate and their eye is raised to the top, which is supposed to be the dwelling place of the gods. And by the way, Nebuchadnezzar saw himself as the chief priest of the cult of Marduk. It was him and him alone who ascended the steps of the ziggurat. He'd go into that room, and why would he go in there? To bring food. And to take out the old food, because guess who never showed up to eat it? And to actually change the bed, the bed clothes, the sheets and stuff. I mean, it's just gross. And they did that because they believed the gods were having sexual liaisons in there. That's why they did it. Not because they're like dusty. That's why they did it, to change the linens. And so can't you imagine Daniel, these boys who are probably a little bit afraid and are thinking, what is in there? And then Daniel comes to this prayer and said, yeah, the God of the universe knows it all, including what's hidden in the dark places of the uppermost ziggurat and the darkest city on the planet. It is still under God's command. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we've asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. So then the next day, Daniel goes to Arioch, and he says, don't execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. So Arioch takes Daniel to the king and says, hey, this redneck Jew says he can interpret the dream for you. Do you think Arioch is taking his life into his own hands? Yep. And do you think he would have been willing to do that had Daniel not talked to him with wisdom and tact? Think there's a correlation there? Verse 26, the king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Now, if that were me, I would want to go right to the head of the class. And I would say, well, yes, I can. And this is why I'm not in the Bible story. But verse 27, Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven. For 3 years, life has been completely disrupted. Things have changed. We had plans for our ministry in the fall of 2019 that had to be set aside. We heard about businesses, even today, that got shut down. And we're asking, like all people have, in all time, when calamity strikes, no matter where it comes from, no matter what it is, we ask, yes, what is going on? And we try to find answers. And then sometimes someone wise and discerning will stand up and say, I'm not really sure, but here's one thing that I do know. There is a God in heaven. He is sovereign. He's in charge. He is good. Do bad things happen? Yes. But is there a God in heaven? Yes or no? It is binary. It is back to the laws of logic. Either he is or he is not. I love this phrase in Daniel's response. No, I cannot tell you your dream, but I have access to the supernatural. He has told me. Please do not take an application from this talk that I'm telling you God's going to give you a direct revelation to interpret dreams. In fact, I'm not saying that whatsoever. But what I am saying to you is that the God of the universe has revealed himself to you. In nature, in Israel, in the prophets, and through his son, Jesus of Nazareth. He has told you things that you would not know, and he has told you what you need to know. There is a God in heaven. He is in charge.